Yeah.
Joe's gonna hit. Joe's gonna hit.
How would you know if I did contract a venereal disease? Like, what information would you be going by here? Like, what do you have access to?
Oh,
I would just pretend that you were talking about it, Joe. I'd be like, and so that what they call that, Joe, is they call that the herb.
Oh, you mean like the one that's the expansion to the Your Mom game, Your Mom's trading game?
Yep, Your Mom's trading card game.
Yep, it's a drafting game where you just keep on drafting cards infinitely because it just keeps on going around.
So, I'm going to tell you a quick story. Back when I was in high school, this one time, I was at a shopping mall, the Burlington Mall. You know, in West Burlington.
I'm familiar with this. Yeah.
Yes, I'm sure you're familiar. I was there with my wife's cousin, and we were walking along, and there was this really doofus-looking security guard standing there. And so my wife's cousin's really quiet, and he's not saying anything. He's kind of looking at the floor, and we walk right by him, and I turn to my wife's cousin, and I go, "Wait, that's a really insulting thing to say about that security guard." He proceeds to come over to us and escort us out of the mall for being rude and unpleasant.
Wow. Well done, Trent. You got all your friends kicked out of a security thing, out of a mall by a security guard.
Well, I mean, it was the West Burlington Mall, so it was actually probably a positive that we were escorted out.
Yeah, given that, that's about.
They call that the royal treatment in West Burlington. Yeah, where Trent and I come from, it's not exactly the most glamorous place to be from. There's like not even like when people say like where are you from? What is your answer, Trent?
I usually claim Nauvoo because no one's ever heard of Nyota.
Yeah,
at least not that they have some chance.
Have people actually heard of Nauvoo though? I mean, I have.
They immediately assume I'm Mormon.
Yep. That would be yep. That would be what gets associated with Nauvoo. It's where the big Mormon temple is. So I mean, yeah. But I mean, like that's only regional though. I mean, when people ask me where I'm from, I'm usually like I'm from Southeast Iowa, and I just kind of leave it at that. There isn't any population centers. I mean, it's like I had a buddy once who was from like southwestern Kansas, sort of like kind of in what he called God's country, in between like Colorado and Kansas, and yeah, it was. He said it was pretty much God's country because nobody else wanted it. It's the way he always finished that statement.
It's like the panhandle of Oklahoma.
Yeah, I had relatives that lived really close to there. Yeah.
Oklahoma was forced to claim it because no other states wanted it.
Well, thank you so much to all of our listeners in the panhandle of Oklahoma. I want you to know that I don't feel that way about you.
Well, like legitimately, it was like the last place in the United States to receive law enforcement.
Well, I feel like there was probably a bunch of people, though, that were fighting against it. That just makes me think of the show Deadwood, because usually if there's a place that's not being, where there's laws that aren't being enforced, there's a bunch of people that are like, yeah, don't bring those laws here. You know, don't disrupt our economy.
That's where all like the national criminals were fleeing for a long time because it was too much trouble to go in and find them in the desolate area.
Nuts. Well, gentlemen, I'd say, it's my fault here that we're starting a little bit late. Thank you guys for your patience, everybody who's there in the chat here. It's good to see you, TC, David, and we're going to get this episode kicked off here. We've got a few exciting reviews here, specifically one that I've been looking forward to from Trent in a while, and one that's going to blow my mind from Andy and leave 18xxers. I wonder if they'll be stunned or if they're going to heave you up on their shoulders, Andy, for what you will say about, we'll leave it to the episode. If you look at the episode notes, you can see it. And he's going to talk about Splendor. Just Splendor. When I saw that from Andy, I thought, okay, are we talking is Splendor going to be some new war game put out by Hollandspiel? Is it the new 18xx mod? No. Andy, you're talking about Splendor.
Joe, you do realize Trent likes to bait you, right?
Trent? Trent?
What?
Andy, what are you actually going to talk about?
Table battles.
I'm really... You know what, dude? Andy, I expect you to review Splendor now.
I changed it before the episode started.
Did you notice what
I think I copied and pasted it with Splendor, though.
Did you look at his hype? Look at his hype.
What? I didn't even read his hype. Are you kidding me? What does it say? Cities of Splendor. The expansion. Yes. I was throwing everything together so fast because I was behind the 8-ball. And now we're going to have some fun, right? Now, table battles is actually Andy's. I knew that. You told me that, Andy.
I timed that one perfect. I'm proud of myself.
Yeah, well, if you just throw it in there. Yeah, I was like, okay, it looks like it's done. Because I was like, it's 10 minutes late already. It took forever to put together all that stuff from Aeon's End, by the way. David here in our chat. Yeah, I'd never opened a box from Aeon's End, and so I was like sorting everything by the number. That took a little while. So anyhow, so what's your hype, Andy? I'm just gonna let you hype whatever. I guess I should get the document out here. Here it's been changed. Okay. Dynasty. All right. Interesting. Okay. Here we go. Let me get a little distance there. Let's see. 3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome to The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly, a podcast about board games. I'm the host of The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly, Joe Sallin. I'm joined tonight by
Andrew Dennison.
Trent Ham.
There's a reason that Trent and Troll are very alliterative. If you check our episode notes, it says something about Andy hyping and reviewing Splendor and its expansion, and I'm sorry to disappoint you guys, but Andy's not going to be talking about anything of the sort. It'll just have to be something keeping you on the edge of your seat until we get to that moment. Anyhow, we're going to talk to you all tonight about when you are defeated, which is kind of how I feel at this moment. When you're defeated in a game, what actions should you take? And I'm defeated because I once again have succumbed to Trent's putting down for Andy some game review that
there's no way
that
he would ever review it.
Ridiculous, and I should have known. And I knew that Andy was reviewing something else, but I was very much breezing over things, gleaning over them, not reading every word. Anyhow,
I'll tell you what. I will review Splendor after I review all the other games I have to play after Dominion.
Andy hasn't played Splendor or Dominion.
Hey, Andy, I'll tell you this much. I think you'll get more out of Dominion than Splendor.
Yeah.
Like that's. Not even a comparison to me. Nothing against Splendor, but like, man, there's just not. Like, there's not much to Splendor compared to, like, even just base Dominion. Well,
next week,
gentlemen,
I review Machikoro.
No. Machikoro, oh, boy. Yeah, there's an awful lot there. Andy, I think you should try Machikoro. It'd be right up your alley.
I'll review Yahtzee first.
Actually, I might be more entertained by Yahtzee. I'm not really sure. I mean, it just depends. Machikoro has range between endless and the right length, which is about 15-20 minutes for the amount of decisions you get to make. But anyhow, guys, if you are new to The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly, I want to welcome you to this gaming podcast endeavor. It involves reviews of games from perspectives of omni gamer, heavy gamer, not self-proclaimed, but somebody who's been slapped with the Euro gamer descriptor for a little while here, though I like to think that I can play just about anything and appreciate it. However, Trent actually can claim that. Trent is Omni Gamer. So we review games, we'll then talk about a topic in the hobby, and on our way out the door, we'll hype some games. And it is tonight's episode about what to do when you're losing that I think is going to proceed with an interesting discussion about, like what elements of psychology go into a person when they're starting to tilt, as I've been personally told, like, oh, dude, you're tilting right now. That was what was told to me when I was taking 15 minutes on the last move in a game of Marco Polo, which, yeah, the win wasn't there. It was like I was $1 short. I was one camel short, no matter how I did it, and it was rough. It was rough, and I ended up taking a dive in that game. But, yeah, so what do you do when you're going to lose? Especially when you have an impact on the outcome of the game for other players. We will talk about that. Oh, we are sponsored by not by the good. Gosh. Trent, I think you've got me on tilt here for hosting. Not that I was ever any good to start with, but we are sponsored by Game Surplus, a great place to find your games. You can find them online, gamesurplus.com, and they are really doing a great job here of stocking a lot of what's new and hot, as well as really difficult to find titles out there, especially a lot of titles by GMT. You can find some of the newest hits as well as some classics in their stock, and they have a lower shipping threshold. Lower threshing ship hold. Goodness gracious. This is going to be a fun episode.
Tilt.
Yeah. Lower threshing ship hold. That sounds like something to do with grain in the 1800s, in the early 1900s, of grain harvesting and supplying. Good grief. Oh, boy. So anyway, hopefully Josh, our wonderful editor, will make me sound intelligent. If not, you didn't have any idea of that, did you, when you started this podcast? Hopefully not. All right. Well, guys, before I dig any more holes or put any more feet in my mouth than can fit, let's start reviewing games. Trent, I'm going to let you drop the bomb of the big LCG that's been out here now ever since Gen Con.
All right, I'm going to actually give a full review of L5R now that I've had a chance to play it, some games of it using 3 core sets. I obviously played it a lot at Gen Con, as I said during the Gen Con episode, but now I've actually been able to construct decks and play it with 3 core sets, and I want to give some more thorough thoughts about it. So L5R is Legend of the Five Rings. It's the new LCG from Fantasy Flight Games. I will say right off the bat, this is, in my opinion, the heaviest LCG they've done. I think it requires more decision-making from the players than any one that they've done so far. And that results occasionally in longer games. I will say that I don't really have a feel yet as to how long a game can be. But I will say I have played games of this that vary anywhere from about a half an hour to about an hour and a half. And that's like a single game of Legend of the Five Rings. So like their other LCGs, they're competitive ones. Legend of the Five Rings is a game where you assemble a deck before you go to the table. And it's based on cards that are sold in fixed packs from Fantasy Flight. So that means it's kind of like buying a game and then buying expansions for it. Except that it's also like a CCG where you build your own deck and bring it to the table. But as you buy expansions for this, you get all the cards you need. You don't have to repeatedly buy packs to see if you get that lucky rare. You just get everything in a pack. This pack tells you what's in it, and that's what you get. And so there's no chasing rares or anything like that. Things that are a little bit different about this. The number one thing you're going to notice when you play Legend of the Five Rings is you're literally building 2 decks, because you play with 2 decks at the table. You have a Dynasty deck, and you have a Conflict deck. I'm messing up the name of one of these. Dynasty deck and Conflict deck, I'm thinking. My brain's not working 100% tonight on the names there. But anyway, the point is...
Hey, maybe I'm not alone.
One of the decks, the Dynasty deck, is like, essentially, you play it with your hand more or less face up on the table. 90% of the time, your opponents can see what's in your, quote, hand from the Dynasty deck. And so that's always information that your opponent has. The cards from your Dynasty deck are mostly going to be the ones that generate the characters that you have in play for the most part. Your other deck, your Conflict deck, Dynasty and Conflict. The Conflict deck is the one that you largely keep hidden from your opponent when you draw cards from it. And those are going to be surprises generally. They're going to be the tricks that you play during the conflicts. They're going to be the hidden surprises that you generate. In this game, there are 7 different clans. They're the ones that are thematically fighting in the land. So you choose a clan. That indicates almost all the, basically tells you what your card pool is going to be of the cards you can put into those 2 decks. So like the Dragon Clan has a certain set of cards that they can use, and the Lion Clan has a certain set, and so on. So you kind of choose a clan, and that really cuts down what you're able to build. You can splash in just a couple cards from other clans, but not very many. There's very limited splashing in. So once you choose a clan, that's 90% of the cards in your deck are going to be from this narrow pool from just that clan. So what you do during the game is you have 4 province cards that are sitting out on the table and 1 stronghold card that's on top of the 5th province. Your goal during the game is to destroy 3 of the 4 provinces and then destroy the stronghold that's on one of the extra provinces. These provinces have a strength number on them and usually a special ability. And at the start of the game, they're all face down. You have to basically bring out characters. Those characters are going to attack the provinces. And when they first attack a province, it gets flipped face up, and you got to find out what it does. That part feels like Netrunner. It feels very bluffy, like you don't quite know what's coming. So you attack your opponent's province, it flips face up, it has an ability and a number on it. In order to destroy that province, you have to win that conflict by more than the number on the province that you're trying to attack. So let's say it has a 5 on it, and you're doing a military conflict against it. All of your cards have to have a total military value at the end of the conflict that's 5 more than whatever your opponent has to destroy it. So if I'm bringing 9 and Joe defends with 5 and his province has 5 on it, I'm not destroying it even though I won by a mile. That's just how the game goes.
Is there any negative effect? Is there like, I mean, I guess there's probably effects that you can play when you win, even if you didn't win by the required amount?
You're getting to the fun part of the game, Joe. The fun part of the game is, so you're doing the conflicts over the provinces, but whenever you initiate a conflict, you choose one of the 5 rings. It's Legend of the 5 Rings, after all. So you choose water, earth, fire, air, or void. And you choose one of those rings and you sit it on that province, in essence, to indicate that this is the ring you're using when you do the conflict. That basically determines a special prize that goes to the attacker if they win. It doesn't matter whether they win by 1 or win by 10, they're going to get that benefit. Each of the 5 rings has a different benefit. And literally there's a token that you put on the card to represent the ring. So like one of them is like you steal an honor from the other player. Honor is like victory points. Another one is you get to tap down one of their characters or untap one of yours. Another one is you basically take a step towards killing one of their characters. I'll get back to that in a minute. But they all have pretty profound effects on the game. So you don't want to just like, I mean, it's good to not have a province destroyed, but you can still have a pretty negative impact from just losing a conflict by a little bit. So they're all important. During a given round, you're allowed to declare 2 conflicts, 1 military and 1 political. All that means is there's a number on every character that says military and another number that's political. So when you do a military conflict, you use the military numbers. When you do the political conflict, you use the political numbers. That's it. Another interesting thing about this game that I really like is, and this is probably the thing that really made me fall in love with the game, is each round you get a bunch of money, basically. In this game, the money is called glory, or not glory, fate. Glory is another thing. The money in this game is called fate. So each round you get a certain amount of fate. Just the starting game, the way the game starts right now, everybody always gets 7 fate a round. So you get this fate and you can spend it however you want, and it never goes away at the end of the round. If you have any left over, you get to keep getting it back. So like if I only spend 4 in a round, I'll have 3 at the start of the next round, get 7 more, and then I'll have 10 to spend. Okay, so when you bring out a character from your provinces, that's where the face-up cards that everybody can see. When you bring out that character, you're going to make a decision right then. So say the character costs 2. You then get to decide how much more fate you want to spend at that point. And you put the extra fate on the character. So let's say I bring out a guy costs 2, and I decide to put 2 more fate on him. What that essentially means is this character is going to live for 3 rounds. Okay? there's very few effects in this game that actually kill a character. The way almost all characters ever leave this game is at the end of the round, you see which characters have no fate on them and they're dead. They go to the discard pile, they're gone. Then you remove one fate from all other characters still in play. So what you're essentially doing, you put 2 fate on is you're saying it's going to last till the end of this round, it's going to remove a fate and be at 1. Then in the next round, you're going to remove a fate and it's going to have none. And then at the end of that round, it's going to have none on it and it's going to go away. So every character you bring out, you got to decide how much fate are you going to invest in it, because that will directly determine how many rounds it's going to stick around. So the simple act of just bringing out a character is a really rough decision point. You've got to look around the board and decide how much you're going to invest in this guy and whether or not how long you want him to stay out. Is this just some chump that you want for 1 round? Then you just pay the casting cost of it and no more. Is this some guy you're really going to invest in and build up and put attachments on and all kinds of stuff like that? You're going to want to invest more in him. You're going to want to put 3 or 4 fate on him so he stays around for a long time. The game has decision points everywhere. And I find that's fantastic. I feel like there's more decision points in L5R than in any game like this I've ever played. I'd say there's more decision points per minute in this than there is in any game like this I've ever played. If you like decisions, this is the one for you. If you want to feel like you don't know what to do because there seems like there's so many good options available, even right off the bat, this one's for you. The best part about the fate mechanic is, this is why I love it so much, it makes it never feel like you're getting steamrolled. Because some dude has 5 guys out, and oh no, he's going to hit you pretty hard a couple times, that's fine. But most of those guys are going to die no matter what. It didn't matter what you do, most of those guys are going to be dead in a round or 2. You don't have to worry about it. I mean, you're going to be able to come back, period. So you never feel like you were completely out of a game. I have never felt like I'm completely out of a game until like the last literal turn in all the games of L5R I've played thus far. I never feel like I'm getting snowballed, period. And that's something that, I mean, I cannot say that about Game of Thrones at all. Their Game of Thrones were 2 round 2, round 3, I realize I'm just getting owned and I might as well just scoop. I don't feel like that with L5R ever. And that's something really in its favor, in my opinion. So my thoughts on the game, I really, really, really enjoy it. My feeling with games like this is that it's very important to have a local community, and I have high hopes of that local community. I've been playing this with Jonathan. Jonathan seems to be as enamored with it as I am. And I know that there are other people locally that are playing it. It's hard to really judge because the core set is not publicly available yet. Everybody that has cards got them at Gen Con. The core set comes out 2 Thursdays from now. So October 5th, I think.
Are they doing like kind of a Gmail type thing where it's like, here, all you cool people, take sets of the base game and then not making it available?
Well, they released it at Gen Con is what they did. And so everybody that has cards right now are the Gen Con, people that went to Gen Con. This is the same thing they did with Game of Thrones. It's like there was about 2 months where the only people that actually had cards were the people that got it at Gen Con. And that's L5R is in that period right now. So on October 5th, then all the stores will have it, and then lots of people will be playing it. But as for now, everybody I'm playing with locally, with one exception, is playing off of the decks I brought to the table. So there's that. I basically built 2 decks that I think are good teaching decks. I realized that like deck building in this game is very hard because you're essentially building 2 decks at once. I also realized that because of the way the game operates, I think this game is going to be able to really support janky decks if you know what you're doing and playing them. So like, you can play just like something goofy and get away with it in this game more than other ones because of that fate mechanic. Dudes are only going to stay around for so long. And you're never going to really feel like you're out of a game. So play a little bit of jankiness as long as you know what you're doing with it. That's kind of been the feel I've been getting from it, is you can just throw stuff together that seems cool to you, and it's going to at least somewhat work. Whereas if you throw stuff together that looks cool to you in say, Game of Thrones for comparison, you're probably going to get face stomped. So yeah, I like that. I feel like this has more game on the table and less game in the deck building than pretty much every other Fantasy Flight LCG. And that, other than maybe early Netrunner. Netrunner right at the start might have not quite been that way, but it quickly moved in that direction where it was more about deck building.
I do have a question for you, Trent. Could you just like very brief, like history of L5R? Because you've been playing it since before this specific edition, right?
I have played it in the past, yes. It used to be a CCG. It was originally made by AEG like 20 years ago. They sold it to Wizards of the Coast, who continued it as a CCG. Then they bought it back from Wizards of the Coast and continued it as a CCG. So it literally went on for 20 years with like a consistent history. And like there were, I don't even know, 50, 60 expansions over the years. There are so many old cards. It's amazing. Anyway, I actually played in a tournament of the old CCG at Gen Con many years ago, and like won prizes at it. I was pretty good at the old L5R, but I kind of burnt out on it because it got burdened down with a lot of keywords, and it became, for me at least, it became almost burdensome to constantly interpret the cards and figure out what the 115 keywords meant.
I think that's kind of what happens unless they start doing, sort of like phases where they only make like a year or two of cards current.
Well, the problem was they just kept not. You can solve that by having like an expansion or two where you use this word and then you kind of retire it. But L5R just kept using all their old words and kept bringing them forward until the current set had like 100 different keywords in it. And I found that burdensome. I didn't enjoy that, and I was having a hard time even interpreting cards later on. And I think that was part of the problem. The thing is, always made L5R successful is one big thing. Theme. The theme is really, really rich in this one. I mean, I will give AEG credit that they have put in tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of effort in the old days of building up the game's theme and making it seem interesting and lively and building up community. That's something that they did very well. Fantasy Flight, it's hard to really judge how much of that they're doing, but I'm saying they're putting more into theme and effort into theme in this than they have in any of their other LCGs by far. It's pretty impressive, some of the stuff they're doing. I won't get into that, but I'll say that Fantasy Flight's doing a good job with theme.
Sure. Yeah, I would just say, I mean, I'm no expert on this, Trent. All I've done is read through a little bit. And regarding the theme, there's the criticism I've heard is that, like, culturally, this new edition kind of mashes together anything that's remotely Asian is kind of mashed together, whereas like Asia is many different cultures, even though, from maybe a Western standpoint, we don't see those nuances. And I would just say, like, I'm not going to get into this specifically, but if you're interested in that specific topic, there was a really excellent written review and a very, like, if you have all night, go and read through the comments on the Shut Up and Sit Down review of L5R. It just kept on kind of like over and over and over. It was very much like a kind of repetitive conversation, but if once you get bored, stop reading it. It's just a really interesting conversation with people from different cultural standpoints. And anyway, it just had a little bit of criticism because of some of the sort of standing practices, and the way that that people didn't necessarily know that they were saying something offensive, but in light of some of the some of the individuals, at least that were reading the review, knew like this is not something that my version of Asian culture would be happy about. I don't know, Trent, if you're familiar at all with that. But
I am very familiar with all that discussion. It's a very interesting thing on cultural appropriation. The issue is, and this is the interesting part, is I don't feel as a Westerner that I can be the one that judges whether or not a cultural appropriation is taking place in this game or not. I'm not the person that should be judging that because it's not my culture that's being drawn upon. So I think that discussion needs to be filtered through people whose cultures are actually being drawn upon. And I don't think those people are even involved in that conversation.
There was the main one was like, I am a Chinese citizen, or I am a Chinese American citizen, or something like that. And he was like it was basically, he was the source of it. So I mean, that was what I got from it, at least. But I agree with you. Like, I'm not trying to start a discussion between us. I don't think that it would be appropriate for that. But I just, to say that that's something that's out there, a very interesting discussion and an aspect of the game. Though, as long as we stick to like the specific gameplay and game mechanics, it sounds to me, Trent, like this is an absolute home run.
It is. It's got a lot of good things going for it. be aware that, I mean, for me personally, what it feels like is it takes the parts I really liked about Netrunner and the parts I liked about Game of Thrones and kind of combined them into one game. And it eliminated some of the aspects that I'm not a big fan of in Game of Thrones, and some of the aspects I'm not a big fan of in Netrunner. That doesn't mean it doesn't have its own issues, but I'll say,
like best of both worlds.
Yeah, it does. It takes a lot of the things I like about both and puts them into one game, which is
just to summarize the written review from Shut Up and Sit Down. It sounded like he was basically saying this is a great game, and it's probably a little bit too heavy for me. Like,
yeah, that is exactly what I read that review. That's exactly what I felt he was saying. He was saying that this is too heavy for me. I appreciate what it is, but it is too heavy for me. Because like I said at the start, I feel like I played all the Fantasy Flight LCGs, and this is the heaviest one they've done. I feel like
Netrunner is already too heavy for like your Magic players, because they expect that the game almost plays itself, based on what you've built in your deck, and the main entertaining part of the game is what you build before the game. But obviously, there's formats, Trent, like what you play, Commander, that's takes that and throws it on its side. But yeah, I think
this game more than any other is driven by the choices on the table. I felt that way about early Netrunner, but then they did some card choices later on that were pushed the game in bad directions. I think they're fixing that now. They're doing a rotation in Netrunner that I think is going to fix a lot of that. But
it wasn't going to be a full-on second edition. I thought I saw some
coming out next month, and they've They've removed a lot of offensive cards from the early history of the game. They're just gone. Like, you're not playing these in tournaments anymore. Like, a checklist of annoying cards is gone from Netrunner, which is really interesting. But back to the point of L5R, it's a game just starting out. It's a game that's got a lot of good table choices. Not thus in the deck building, but in the table choices, which is something that appealed to me about early Netrunner and something that really appeals to me here. And I feel like based on the cards that are in the core set, these people are going to be real conservative on their card ability powers. Like, there aren't the cards. I mean, there were cards initially in Netrunner right off the bat that were setting people off like this might be a red flag as a problem down the road. There's nothing like that in L5R. Everything is reasonable. Like, nothing feels like this is insane. There's no cards that feel like you draw this, you win at all. They all just feel like tools towards an end goal, which I like. So,
cool. Sounds really interesting. Yeah, maybe someday I'll be able to just do one of your teaching deck things, and I can get a little bit of just a taste of it and figure it out. But man, I really like those LCGs, but it's a really
attention. Yes,
it's a traumatic experience to see a new one come out for me. And what it does is it brings back, I feel almost like these are my children that I've been neglecting. I haven't bought the most recent thing for Game of Thrones because I'm like, man, I need to just build a deck. I need to do something. I need to get back into it. At Lord of the Rings, the card game, I have 3 shrink-wrapped big box expansions. It's just a tough it's a tough thing for me to let it go. And I honestly, I'm still holding on to those 2, but I still do want to see, what exactly you mean, especially since you made references to Game of Thrones. And there are some things about Game of Thrones that I'm currently a little bit turned off by, and maybe L5R is going to touch.
The Game of Thrones meta has changed a lot since you kind of toned down on playing. It's in a very different place. So,
okay, I'll take a look at it. Well, thank you, Trent.
I want to touch on one thing that was mentioned in the chat. It was asked. TC asked whether or not this is playable online yet, and both Netrunner and Game of Thrones have websites that you can go and play the game at online, basically for free. They're not officially sanctioned by Fantasy Flight, but Fantasy Flight seems to basically you just kind of pretend they're not, ignore their existence, and they go on. Both Netrunner and Game of Thrones has it, and I've heard many rumors that an L5R one is incoming. And it's basically just a website you go to. It's not an app or anything. And I play the Game of Thrones one fairly often. I kind of got burnt out on Netrunner because, as I've alluded to, there are some serious card pool issues. But the Game of Thrones is very good. And if there's something like that for L5R, I'll be on there quite a bit because I really am impressed with what this game has to offer.
Cool. All right. Well, let's go ahead and interlude through from your 2-player card game LCG to a different 2-player battle system and hear whether or not Andy still actually exists.
Yes, I got a chance to play the new game from Hollandspiel, Table Battles. So Table Battles is a 2-player war game filler is its design. So basically what you get is you pick a battle. There's like 8 battles in the base game. You select a battle that tells you what units you're going to use, which are cards. You draw those cards. You lay them out in front of you. Some will go in sort of your main battle line. Some will go in reserve, so on and so on. It tells you how many hit points they have in the form of these different colored sticks, wooden sticks that you put in front of them that represent kind of their life. You also get a certain amount of morale cubes. What you do with this game, though, and kind of where I found it to be very clever, and I guess, I don't know if I preface this is kind of my initial thoughts, because I played one game of it and we played a couple things wrong, so I want to try it again with the right rules. But still, reading the rules and looking at it, there's some really clever things going on in this design. So for one, a lot of your abilities to attack or target or protect units are limited. So like I have this unit, it can attack these 3 units on the enemy side. I have this unit, it can do this special ability that only defends this other unit I have. So what this all is trying to do, basically, the fact that only certain units can attack other units, it feels like to me they're trying to recreate the idea of essentially a map in a war game. So, this unit can only screen this unit because in this battle they were close together. This unit can only attack this unit because they are close together. So it kind of recreates that experience of having a map and the feel of that without having one out in front of you. What you do is you basically roll dice. Different units will say different things, like it can have a 6 on it, or it can have a 5 on it, or you need a pair or 2 pairs, or any kind of dice you want, or whatever like that. You have to lay your dice on these units, basically programming them to go. Then what makes this interesting is so many of these kind of dice games are like, you roll your dice, then you take your actions. This one's different. You roll your dice at the end of your turn. So basically, like if I was playing Trent at this, Trent would roll his dice. He would put them on his cards the way he wants them. Then his turn's over. I get to look at what he's done, roll my dice, and go, okay, how can I counter what he's done? So I do that, but then Trent gets the option of now looking at what I've done and going, how can I counter that? There's also action interrupts that can be done. So, for example, I played this with Joe, and one of the interrupt actions was screen. You basically cancel the attack of an opponent. When you play that, if you can counter that attack, you have to counter that attack, which is something we didn't play right the first time. But basically, if you use an interrupt action, you lose your next actions. So you got to set these situations up that will come into your favor. I'm really interested to try this again because I think it'll fit nicely in that thinky filler category. There is a fair amount of randomness in the terms of the dice you roll and what you can do with them, but there's no random setup or anything like that. It's just, okay, I got 2 pair this round. Where can I put that to the best effect? It's just trying to be a really filler game for war gamers. I think once you got this down, you could easily play it 15, 20 minutes a battle and be done. For that length, the randomness doesn't bother me, and it makes it kind of interesting. So this might be one of the first dice chuckers I've appreciated in quite a while. I just want to play it some more and maybe play a scenario that has artillery in it and has some more unique kind of things you can do. The one me and Joe played was very much a kind of I hit, you defend. There wasn't a lot of special abilities in the special units or anything, but there's just a lot of interesting little clever things going on in this design for a filler game, and that makes me want to try it again. And I know it's going to come out with expansions. I think I've heard there's at least 2 coming out in 2018 early, because it's very much a system. So an expansion is boop, deck of cards. Here you go. Units and battles, go to it. So I'm really interested to keep trying this one. And like I said, it's got a healthy dose of randomness, but I think it does a good job of making it feel like you're playing a war game in like 15, 20 minutes. I know they've been doing really well with this. I think they said they sold out of all the copies they had in like 14 hours. And I just was listening to a interview with Tom Russell, the guy who designed the game and runs Hollenspiel. He said they're almost out of all of their supply again. So it's doing really well. I think it's really worth checking out. Is kind of an interesting filler game.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, Andy. I got a chance to play it with you, and I think it's mainly a tactical game because you only have so many like dice to station, and so you're pretty much forced to be constantly moving these about what units you have. But I like the fact that you're rolling them and then sort of deciding how to station them as opposed to rolling, quote unquote, for success. Though I think it's a fairly thin step, not too much of a step towards actual roll for success, because Andy, I think the way it shook out in our specific game, you were more favored by rolling sets of the same dice, and my side was more favored by rolling a straight. But we all had sort of like doubles that could be used in different places, and different units needed different values.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the specific units needing to attack other specific units is really where your war game historian minded people are going to get their flavor from it, right? There's not an actual battlefield. Everything is abstracted down to cards, but you're going to be able to consider like, okay, well, Oliver Cromwell was this general, or, he represented these forces in this battle, and these are the guys that he took out first. Historically is how all of the actions you're going to take are based. So you are kind of like married to the history of the game. You're limited in what decisions you can make with a unit, but by putting your dice on that unit, you know what your choices are. It's kind of like your units represent who you can attack, because each of them has sort of a different quote-unquote target that they would then go through first. I like that the game is just very – it's streamlined, Andy. It's streamlined, damn it. It is streamlined down to the absolute most streamlined you can get a war game without losing its historical flair. It really
Andy, he likes his streamlining.
It is, and Andy, I don't think there's a way that you can argue with that. I mean, here's what it does. Your tactical war games involve a lot of you deciding an attack and then having to roll a bunch of dice to figure out what that attack. Here, it is a modified system because your actions basically are all, for the most part, deterministic. I don't think there was any action in our game that involved randomness. The only randomness was in the system that you rolled at the end of the round and stationed your dice, and you may or may not have been able to station dice depending on what you had. So, I mean, it's still a different system, and I think that it works this way because it wouldn't feel like if you did it a tactical war game way, your tactical war game players would be like, yeah, this just makes me want to play something more complex. It's not giving me the same feeling. Well, here, you've actually got a different system, and it's very functional. I think that the fact that there's all these different scenarios is cool. A couple of gripes here. Most of my gripes have to do with the fact that this is being put out by very much a boutique publisher. So unless you're very familiar with the type of games that Andy and a lot of like the people that are very high on Hollenspiel, you should understand that when you buy this game, you're going to be paying for a box. You're going to open the box and be like, this is what's in it. There's very, very little art in the game. I think that the game could be redone by a publisher that can afford to invest a little bit more in it, like artwork. Maybe this will be Hollenspiel's critical mass, though. Maybe this will be their quote-unquote, their food chain magnet, splatter-wise, which gets them to start putting an artwork element, and maybe having an art budget as opposed to just like bare bones, minimalistic boxes of text on cards. So I would say that could certainly help. But it's not, in the end, I do think that it's what it did for me is the same thing that a lot of Euro games do for me theme-wise. I didn't feel like I learned that much about the specific conflict by playing the game. But the game did is I felt like there were certain behaviors that I noticed, and that made me interested. That made me want to go look it up. I read the Wikipedia page for the Battle of Marston's Moor as we were playing this, and I was interested. And, of course, I realized that my side was the losing side as I was getting trampled. However, we were playing a rule really, really wrong, and that was one of the reasons that I got
we
so
need to play
hopelessly
this the right way.
Yeah, we need to play it again the right way. But, I mean, I did get a feel for the system. It's very much, first blush, like Andy said, first blush, but cool system, cool that they're going to be coming out with expansions. I think it's neat that this is the type of system that the game company is coming out with, Hollandspiel in this case, because I think a lot of times these boutique publishers get so, episodic. Not so much episodic, but it's like they're putting together movies when they really could be putting together episodes that go together. I'm looking at you, 18xx. I feel like there's a way to make 18xx games, where you can be able to play multiple ones with the same set. Now, I know, Kyle in the comments, go ahead, strike me down with your fist of vengeance. But the thing is, I think it's really cool just conceptually that Hollandspiel has done this, and that, Andy, that you are entertained by it as well. Because my own opinion is, you're more of the Hollandspiel fan here, and I think it's interesting that you're positive about it. So anyway, Trent, do you have any thoughts about this specific system? I don't know if you got to see much about it.
No, but I want to ask Andy this.
What's that?
Simple question, Andy. Is it as streamlined as Splendor?
Streamlined. I don't know. I haven't played Splendor, man.
Oh, you're lucky then.
Yeah. Now, it is a very streamlined war game, but in a filler, that's all right. I mean, the goal is to keep the game short at this point. But yeah, I'm really interested to play it some more and try some of the different battles and make sure I got the rules right on it. The only thing I think might be tough is if a non-war gamer gets a hold of it, because I'm just now sort of getting to where, like, I'm starting to understand war game rule books a little bit more. So it's not that the rule books are bad. It's just that I've kind of learned that in war games, like, the wording that is used at every point is very, very critical. And almost kind of like 18xx rule books. And the mistakes I made in teaching it were because I was not remembering the
there's only 2 pages
words.
front and back in this rule book. So, I mean, you're talking about like the entry level here is very low. So if you're interested, this is a great place to step in. It does have some of the same aspects, though, Andy, like you said. It's, there are mistakes to be made because of how specific that wording is. Capitalized words are all in the glossary, that type of thing.
Well, and it's just so much. It's like, in this situation, this should or can happen. Yeah, and it's just I haven't learned to read that with all the clarity that is needed yet. I'm kind of training my brain to read war game rule books like that. But anyway, I really like it. Hoping to check it out some more. So Trent, you did your review.
What?
Oh, Joe left.
Joe left.
Yeah, he went to go
rage quit on us.
Probably.
That's Joe and his rage quitting.
Yeah, rage quitting. Rage quitting. Anyway, table battles is pretty cool.
Sounds good.
I like it. Yeah.
Now let's hear Joe's review of the Through the Ages app. Joe, take it away. And that was an exciting review of the Through the Ages app from Joe.
Yeah, that was the sound of me drinking a glass of water. Thank you. Yeah, I caught the end of that, Trent. Thank you so much for introducing and dismissing my review. All right, so our topic tonight. Okay, so starting, I'm not going to give a full review of the Mystery of Stargazer's Manor app, especially not when my dog is grabbing tissues out of my trash.
Did you just quit again? This is gonna be the best episode ever on audio.
This is gonna be like the best listening for everyone not doing this live.
Yeah. Sorry about that, gentlemen. So, yeah.
This is your own fault for owning poodles.
You get over here. Yeah, everybody who's watching live, here he is. He's the demon. All right. I'm not going to give a full review of this first one here, but I'm going to tell you guys just a little bit about the Escape the Room series, Mystery at Stargazer's Manor from Think Fun Games. Think Fun Games, kind of a kids game company. Generally, they make like kid-friendly board games. The only other thing I own by them is this roller coaster challenge that ultimately wasn't much of a challenge, but it works really well at my wife's classroom. She's got it works well with kids that like building things, so just kind of some building block sets and stuff. Anyway, this one is a Escape the Room system, but basically what you're going to do is read a paragraph of text, and then there's all these envelopes of puzzles, and you have to just kind of figure out, like you'll get a piece or two of the first puzzle and this little decoder ring thing. And so whenever you think you know the code to move on to the next puzzle, you'll try to type it into this decoder ring, and if the correct symbols show up, you've gotten it correct. So I mean, it feels kind of weird that you can just crack open an envelope even if you're not right, but I suppose you'd be technically breaking the rules of the game. It's nice that you don't have to necessarily play it with an app, but I suppose that, like, since my other experiences in escape rooms are the real thing, going to escape rooms and playing the Unlock series, the Unlock series actually does like hide where you're supposed to go from you. Whereas this Mystery at Stargazer's Manor, I feel like it was staring me right in the face, but I had essentially to use a decoder ring to get there. So it was a little bizarre that way. The puzzles were incredibly simple and easy, friendly for kids. Took 6 of us adults 30 minutes out of the proposed hour and a half. So we were done really quick, and nothing here was very difficult. However, it involved a lot of manipulatives, and on the plus side, when we were all done, I thought that it was only going to be a one-play thing, but there even is instructions on the website to be able to put it all back together. It was really lacking in terms of giving you a spatial feeling that you were actually in an escape room area, because it just felt like there was a bunch of puzzles. I never felt like I was actually in the Stargazer's Manor. I mean, I did get a little bit of the narrative as you moved from place to place. It was kind of cool as you would find new blocks of text, but there really wasn't much of a physical location to it, and I feel like that was really lacking. It was lacking atmosphere because of that. So anyway, that's my mini review of Mystery at Stargazer's Manor, the Escape the Room series from Think Fun. It is definitely one that I would recommend if you have children and one to do with them, but for me, it is not nearly as entertaining or engrossing as the Unlock series. So I'm still looking forward to playing the Exit series. And now for the thing that is absolutely consuming my life. I'm sorry if I've not replied to any of your contact with me because I'm playing the Through the Ages app. The Through the Ages app just dropped in this last week, and it has amazing online asynchronous play. It has a great friend system where you're able to like be in the middle of a game and get, like send friend requests, accept friend requests without leaving your game. It has the ability to jump into an online game and then right back. It has a button where you just press it, says current challenge, and it gets you right back to the game that you were playing. And it has an entire challenge game system that is just, oh man, like I've probably played 25 games of Through the Ages in the last week, all on my phone. And each one takes me less than an hour, even with 4 players. And I'm having mostly no problems with stability. I've had a few crashes, but it's always saved all the stuff. It's never been a crash that's like ruined anything for me, though. I mean, that could totally happen. It's still, fairly new. But it just is incredibly stable. I was able to start playing it without going through the tutorial. The tutorial has the same sort of flavor that I would expect from a great Vlada rulebook. Think Dungeon Lords, think Space Alert. It's one of those, but it's in app form, and it uses like Vlada being ancient Vlada who's teaching you the game. Like, it's hilarious because usually when you draft a leader, it says their special ability. Ancient Vlada's special ability is teaches you how to play the game. It's hilarious. It has all those touches like that. I would say it is one of the best bargains I've ever bought app-wise at $10. But that's just because it gives me it makes Through the Ages something I love and something that's so difficult to actually play because it takes several hours and it's difficult to teach and it's got a lot of management. And even with the new edition, which is very much an improved edition, it still is not on the level of this amazing app. And I'm getting to play it. I'm loving it. The challenges, oh my goodness. Like right now I'm trying to play against computers that are literally cheating at the game. Loki, Thor, and Odin have like these unfair military advantages to start the game in terms of actions and strength. And oh man, I'm loving the game. I've lost this current challenge I'm on at least 7 times, but that was the same way my last one was. And finally getting that win is just so huge. And oh goodness, it's forcing me to explore different directions, dimensions of Through the Ages because it changes up the flow of the game. And when they make things cost 20% less, now all of a sudden different strategies are better than others. And I'm just loving it, guys. I'm really loving the system. And the Through the Ages app is absolutely the best board gaming app that I've ever played. So, Andy, how would you compare it to the Splendor app?
Splendor kicks its ass. I mean, seriously.
All right. Trent?
I like the Through the Ages app because I can play it by myself when I'm lonely, and I just hide and play it by myself. Here's the thing. I want to tell you the honest truth. I don't really get. I have a hard time really clicking with board game app implementations. This one's pretty good, but after a while, like I miss the table components. I miss seeing people across from me. And although this is still kind of in a honeymoon period, I know that will eventually happen with this. I can kind of already feel it starting. So there you go.
You don't
Okay.
get. You don't get to
it's
see.
definitely in a honeymoon part, but I can tell you right now, I need to take a turn in my game of Through the Ages with somebody who's in our chat right now. And I feel very much connected to that individual, especially when I bring down the hammer on his jaw. Oh.
Yeah. It's the only problem in the online versions is you don't get to see the person break down crying after the 3rd aggression card you played on. I'm sorry, John.
Oh, you guys did notice, though, Trent and Andy, that when I in my second game of it, I played against AI opponents, and I named them after you guys. Now I'm actually playing against real friends, but that was before I had any on Through the Ages. Yeah, and by the way, Trent, it was actually you getting aggressed by Andy in that game.
Which game?
The game where I was playing with AI versions of you and Andy.
Oh, okay.
That one. Yeah, the one where you saw it and thought like, man, he must have a lot to do. All right, that's my review of Through the Ages, the app. Good times. Let's move on here now. And Trent, could you please introduce our talk about what you do when you're in a situation you can't win? If you can't beat them, what do you do?
Let's paint us a little scenario here. Last Sunday, I was playing Whistle Stop with 3 regular people in my gaming group, 3 people that I'm very familiar with playing with. I played many games with all 3 of them. We were playing Whistle Stop. For 2 of the players, it was a new game. For the other 2, it was like 2nd or 3rd place, somewhere in that realm. And we're all playing this game, and I was in a position where I realized that what I was doing was not going to lead me to a victory. I was not going to win this game. However, if I rush the end of the game, because this is a Whistle Stop is a game where basically the game length is somewhat decided by the players. You can make a game end early. I realized that if I rushed the end of the game and did everything I could to rush the end of the game, I pretty much guaranteed myself 2nd. Now, on the other hand, I could try out some new stuff and play around for a while and maybe still get 2nd, but I'd probably wind up in 3rd and maybe even in last. So what I chose to do at that point is like, well, I'm not going to win no matter what I do, so I'm going to play for 2nd, and I can guarantee myself 2nd by rushing the end of the game. So that's what I did. I rushed the end of the game. I made the game end really fast. I got all my trains off the map ASAP, and everybody was like, wow, that was fast. But one of the players really didn't like that. It was like really left with like, why did you do this? What was the point? And I was like, well, I'm not going to win, so I'm going to play for 2nd. I want to end up with the best finishing place possible whenever I'm playing a game. And he's like, but you just ended the game and made it not fun for anyone else. And I'm like, but would it have been more fun if I just sat around and twirled my thumbs and the other players surpassed me in score? I was like, how is that? What is that? So it ended up kind of an interesting discussion about if you're in a position where you, I mean, if you're playing a competitive game, is it always the right move to play to win? And if you can't win, is it the right move? What is the right move to do then? Is it to play as hard as you can for second? Is it to just like be like, oh, this is fun and not care bear and not really do anything? Is it to just solely take out the person that caused you to not finish first? Which I gotta admit, I also did in that game. Part of the reason I rushed for second is the person that guaranteed that I couldn't finish first was going to finish fourth. They were going to finish dead last for that if I rushed it. So that was a little bit of an additional incentive for me in doing that. Not the full incentive, but that's the thing. Is like, what responsibility in a competitive game do players have? Should they play for the win, period? What if they are in a situation where they can't win? Should they play hard to get second? Should they invent their own goal? What should they do? Do they have obligation to the other players to make the game more fun for them and not do things like rush the end of the game? And I felt like that game of Whistle Stop kind of brought all of that up. So I wanted to throw that out here for you guys to think about. Obviously, my feeling is you play to win within the rules of the game. If you can't win, then you play for second within the rules of the game. If you can't get first or second, you play for third within the rules of the game. And if you happen to, you know, knock down one of those people that made sure you couldn't win, that's great, but that's just kind of a bonus.
So is it more of a bonus for you then? What if, Trent, what if you took an action in a game that made me unable to win? And then my reaction to that was to take both of us out of the game.
I consider that a valid reaction. It doesn't really, it's not how I would play, but I understand it.
I'm just looking to understand. I mean, I've had friends that are like that. Like, as soon as you want to attack them, it's just like they just go straight for you, don't really care how it goes. As soon as they feel, you know, like you've drawn first blood, it's now, you know, they're going to be the last laugh, regardless of whether or not it's even worth it. My question is, what is more important? Is what's more important, like getting the highest place? Let's say that you can't get second. Let's say that you can't even get third. Let's say that it's a 6-player game and the best you can do is 5th. Do you play for that, or do you play to just disrupt other players and play to like hit the person that got you, or play to hit the person that's in the lead? What do you do?
If I can play for a position that's not last, that's what I'll play for. That's what I do. If it is clear to me that nothing I do is going to do anything other than cause me to finish last, I'll probably try to take out the person that did the most damage to put me in that spot. But if there's any realistic shot of me getting a spot other than last, I'll play for that.
Now, are we restricting this discussion to like Euro games, or are we going to talk about like total, like, I mean, because the gloves are kind of off in a negotiation game. Would you agree with that, Trent?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It matters a lot on the type of game because, like, for example, I mean, I played kind of half of the game of diplomacy, but I could see a point to where you're like, okay, you betrayed me, and there's no coming back from this. So
I will suicide bomb you, yes.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's kind of like what happens in Risk, right? I mean, you make all these deals, and then someone's just like, and you screwed me. So I'm not going to win, but I'm going to do my damnedest to leave you open to somebody else. Like,
I view that, my personal view on that is I view that as a cost of making a move like that.
Right. I mean, it's a social consequence. But I think in those styles of games, that's like meaningful. That's kind of part of the deal. But if you're talking like, I don't know, playing Vinos or something like that, like a heavy, thinky Euro, I don't know if that idea is valid anymore. Like,
it would be Agricola. Someone takes the spot you need to be able to fill your people, and suddenly you have 3 starvation cards. You can spend the rest of the game just trying to guess what they want and putting your dude there.
Oh, that's true.
Well, yeah, that'd be an interesting game. I mean, Agricola, when you specifically bring up Agricola, because that's what I was kind of hoping for, Trent. I feel like this discussion becomes the most pure when you're talking about when we like play it in an environment where all players are experienced players, all players understand like the impact of their actions, you know, and all players generally have at least enough experience with the game to where they are in the position they are in the end of the game because of the choices, decisions, or things that have happened throughout the game. Maybe just, you know, things in the game state that happen, but they should be kind of aware of that. Because I think that a lot of times, you know, specifically, there can be perceived things in games, and a lot of times our perception is incredibly warped because, you know, we want to win, and we want to win at all costs or something. Like, especially if it's your first time playing a game, like, I don't know, I feel kind of like maybe just you should be playing it to see what happens, and ultimately you shouldn't be like, you know, ever specifically upset at other players because they took an action that did anything. I mean, if they directly attacked you and it hurt you and you didn't feel like that was an appropriate move, if you feel like, well, why'd you attack me? You could have attacked him. He's actually winning. I'm here playing for like not last, and you've attacked me. I don't understand why you did that. You know, like,
you can always just say, you make that move, I'll never play a game with you ever again.
Oh yeah, it's always a nice little pin that you can pull out the grenade at the table. Yeah, that's.
Well, I think it. Yeah, I mean, there's a matter of, you know, if this is like a game where everyone knows what they're doing, I feel like, I guess if there was this situation, let's say you had, I guess this happened. I was playing. I think it was a game of 1889, for example, and I had one guy was going to win. There was no question about it. Like, there was no way I could earn enough money in the next ORs I had available to me to come in first. It wasn't going to happen. But I saw a situation to where I could create an instance where I could, like, basically make the second place player force buy a train and like a diesel. So I was going to get second. At that point, yeah, I'm like, all right, I'm playing for second. So, you know, maybe, like, I don't know, if you're doing a war game or something, or a dudes on a map game, if you attacking the person in first place, it doesn't move up your position, but attacking a person in second place does move up your position. I feel like you would be almost stupid to not do that, I guess, in my mind.
You wouldn't be playing the game optimally if you know, I mean, like I don't think you can ever fault a player for optimal play, Trent. And I think what you're talking about here is you're playing the game optimally, or at least perceived optimally for you. Now, for another player to hold that against you it just seems to me like there was probably something else that was disrupting this player, you know, like maybe a frustration with learning a game, or, you know, the way the game was getting played. I mean, it's tough, you know, when you can sit there and say, hey, I did what was best for me. I just want you to understand that I did what was best for me. It wasn't anything personal. Like, when we're in a game, you know, games are a competitive environment. You have to be able to stomach that. If another player, though, like, and I've just asked this question in the chat because, like, you know, playing optimally, Trent, to me seems like something that you can always reason with other players and say, logically, this was the best move for me. There's no reason for you to be upset. You know, there's no reason for you to be upset and be able to vocalize that and put that you know, like, expect me to bear it with you being upset. That's your own fault. However, like, what if we do have that player whose play style is, you attacked me, you're going down? Like, is that now less socially acceptable? What do you guys think?
I would find playing with someone who acts like that just to be a very frustrating experience, because that's not even playing within the spirit of the game. That's just being sort of socially. That's just saying, okay, I don't know. That attitude, depending on the game you're playing specifically, but if you're playing a dudes on a map game and that's their attitude coming into it, and you know that, they're setting up a situation where it's really a no-win situation for you. So it's like, dudes on a map game, or a lot of them, are specifically designed to be balanced by the players. Oh, you're getting in the lead. Let's slow you down. Oh, you're doing this. Let's slow you down. And while you're doing that, someone gets ahead. But if somebody pulls that, if you attack me, I take you out. What they're basically saying is, let me play my own game so that I can win the game and not be bothered by anybody. It's not playing within the correct scope of the game. If you want to do that, just go play a freaking multiplayer solitaire game. That's just not acceptable behavior in my mind. If it's a war game, dudes on a map, and that's their attitude going into it, then they shouldn't be going into it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, sometimes, though, you're in a group where that's the game that people want to play. What happens if you get kind of roped into that experience and then it ends up sort of turning negative? Is it on you, or is it on the players that asked you to be a part of it?
It's on the
there's a
player
lot
who's
of
being a dick. I mean, that's my attitude. But
yeah, but I mean, is the player who's trying to rope another player who's not maybe less than comfortable in that environment? Is it them? Are they the ones that are, essentially drawing the first blood? Like,
so you're saying the guy has this attitude, doesn't want to play the game, and someone's like, "Nah, it'll be fine, play the game."
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Then it's. I mean, I think at that point, like if I was that person, I don't know if I would do that. I would just be immensely frustrated by the experience. I don't know. I think in that situation, I'd be more apt to take out the person who drew me into the game. I mean, that's the weird, twisted way my brain works. Oh, you're making me have this miserable experience. Here, let me bring you down to where I'm feeling.
But what if they get butthurt about it, Andy? What if?
I know. I mean, that's the kind of thing. That's the thing where I think you need to understand that different people like different games and plan accordingly. Like, I'm big into the heavy, quirky games. And so when we're at our local game night, if I'm going to play one of these or I'm putting it out there and I don't know the person, I'll ask, like, what kind of games do you like? Is this going to be a problem with you? Like, if I'm going to introduce people to an infamous Traffic, I'm just like, this game is like distilled evil. Do you like that kind of experience? Because if you don't, we'll play something else. Like, this game is very much, I see you getting an edge. I'm going to go kick over your sandcastle and like pee on it for fun. If you don't like that experience, then we should play something else. I mean, you have this impetus to like think about that thing. I think if you're setting up a situation like you described, that to me, that's going to be like, we're coming to play this game. We absolutely have to play this game, and we're willing to put up with suboptimal situations to play it. I think you're asking kind of for problems right there. If you're putting the game in front, if you're putting the ability to play the game ahead of the experience of playing the game, I think then you're kind of asking for your own, amount of trouble there. So I mean, for me, I think that's who's ever pushing to get that game played. There's times when
But here's the thing, Andy, though. A lot of times perception is a huge factor. Like,
right.
We don't necessarily know. I mean, not everybody reads reviews, and not every review is all that helpful. And a lot of times you end up not even understanding that this game is totally different than what you thought. Trent, do you remember the very first time we ever played games together? It was a game called Black Fleet.
Yeah, Black Fleet nonsense. And I remember that.
I didn't even know who you were, but it was hilarious because, like, the first action was taken in the game, and then Trent and I looked at each other, and we were like, oh, this is that kind of game. Like if I'd have known this was just going to be about punching each other in the face, I don't think I would have played this game.
Yeah, I fully remember that game. That was it was not what I was initially expecting from the rules teach. It was a punch you in the face game. Yeah, if I remember that. The game was different than I expected, and that was part of like, yeah, it's one of those kind of games. Yeah. And I mean, knowing that it was one of those kind of games, maybe kind of play it differently. But I think here's what it comes down to for me. If I can understand the reasoning and you can explain to me your objective in the game and what you were trying to do is achieve that objective. And it makes reasonable sense, and it's not just like, I hate Joe, I'm trying to make him lose. I'm fine with that.
Well, what if it is that they hate me, though? Is that okay if they're just able to enunciate that very clearly? What if I'm okay with that? What if I'm like, well, here we go, squeaker nose and sad tears and, just keep punching the sad clown, I guess.
I don't think so, because they talk about this idea in on Ludology podcast all the time, but the magic circle or kind of the social construct of entering the game. And to me, like when I sit down to play games with people, we're kind of entering into that social contract. The idea of we're here to play this game. There are rules to playing the game. There is, once we are in this game, we're in the game mode. But outside of the game, this is a different situation. So, like, when I play games with you, Joe, that can be very aggressive, like, I consider you a friend outside of the game, and that's all great. I'm going to cut you off at the knees if I can in a confrontational game. And I will smile happily while doing it and talk to you about all the other things we're doing in our lives quite happily and not glare at you angrily or like, I'm getting Joe back finally. Like, that's just the game. So, if it's a coin game, it's like, oh, yeah, I'm going to wreck Joe's city. We're going to initiate a terrorist action. So how's life going, Joe? Is it pretty good? Yeah. Okay, here's another terrorist action against Joe. Hey, man, how's your dog doing?
Yeah.
It's to me, those things are separate. And if you are an individual that can't separate out a game experience to your real life feelings to that degree, then you got to really think about that about yourself and then play games that aren't going to offend you. This took a while.
It comes down to it. I don't think that a competitive endeavor is really for you.
Right.
You shouldn't be playing a game where people can disrupt you. And in a hobby like this, yeah, it's like interaction is a big part of the game. There's very few games out there where there's literally zero player interaction. And when I do play a game like that, I feel like, this is bizarre. Why am I playing this with people? This isn't the type of game that I'm going for. And I don't think that people are seeking out, tabletop games to play with other people that don't involve that. I just think, is there certain elements, though, of understanding and maybe class that should be had by the player that's taking the action regardless of whether or not it's justifiable? Is that what you think? Do you think that ever has an aspect on it that it's more like it's not what you did, it's how you did it, that sort of thing? It's your attitude?
I don't know. Like I was starting to say earlier, I feel like when I sit down for a game, if someone makes a move and they can at least explain their logic and why they made that move, like I made that move because it helped me finish second and I want to finish second. I understand that. If they say I made this move because this guy took me out of the game and I want to take him out, I understand that. The only time I don't understand is when it starts to go to stuff outside the game, and I think that's punching Joe for the sake of punching Joe because it's funny is pretty terrible, unless it's like you're playing a game where that's what it is, like Cards Against Humanity or something. Or you're making threats against friendship or stuff like that. That's inappropriate. But I think as long as it's within the context of the game and you're trying to either finish well yourself or get revenge on someone who made you finish poorly and it's all within that game, that's fine. And I feel weird when I play with people and they get upset when I do something that makes sense within a game conclusion. I'm playing for second, or that guy did something to me, so I'm doing something back to him. Because those things make complete sense to me, and then someone gets upset, I feel very weird and awkward, and I almost don't know how to handle it. So you got upset at something that seems completely normal and expected to me.
Yeah, I think that Trent, that you're definitely here arguing for if you're going to be in a competitive hobby where whoever wins is actually, a part of what you're doing, where it's not just we all do what's best, like, and I feel like running is a little bit different than other hobbies in a lot of ways. Like, people that engage in distance running a lot of times are challenging themselves to do the best that they possibly can. And how well another runner does in a race can mean very little, but the fact that they completed the race is really what it's about. And I think that, there are games that are probably out there that are like that. Maybe cooperative games would be better, because however, though, cooperative games breed into that, like, is suboptimal play offensive to you? You know what I mean? Like when you're sitting there and you're doing the best you can, and another player in a co-op is just, they made a poor move, and you can identify, like, why did you do this? And they're like, oh, I didn't think it was going to have this sort of an impact. And it's like, I don't know. It's kind of interesting because that social contract becomes more interesting. And I think the most interesting that social contract ever gets, Trent, that we're talking about here in terms of, like, you're going into a competitive endeavor. I know there are many that are like, if it's legal within the game's rules, you need to be okay with it, regardless. Like, Trent, saying that I'm doing this because I hate Joe is fine, because you're doing an action that's possible in the game rules. And it's Joe's fault for playing a game that, that involves that, unless Joe's okay with it. Like, Joe's definitely okay with talking about himself in the third person. Like, semi-cooperative games are where it becomes really weird. And I would say that's where I'm like, no. Like, semi-cooperative games, Andy, I think you mentioned this. And would you kind of, when we were preparing this topic, you'd said something about this that rang true for me. Could you enunciate that to the viewers?
Right. So there's a couple. The big, I think, thing that most people have as an issue in semi-cooperative games, that being a game that's cooperative, we're all working together. However, there could be sub goals or a situation where one of us is going to win, but we have to kind of all work together at some point. So the two examples I have on that front are Dead of Winter and Archipelago. So here's a situation. It was discussed on the forums a year or so ago somewhere, and I read it. It was a real interesting idea. Okay, let's say we've got a situation in the game Archipelago, which is semi-cooperative. In this game, you can have these weird conflicts, and then you have to give up so many resources to get everyone back up, or the game just can die and everyone loses, right? So this was the situation. They were in this state where if somebody didn't give up a pineapple, then the game was over. There were 3 players. The 2 guys that were in first and second, basically they each gave a pineapple or something. They knew that the guy in the distant third place had 2 pineapples, and that would basically keep the game going. They looked at him. They're like, okay, we know we got to resolve this conflict. Give up your 2 pineapples. And he's like, you guys have to give me something for it. I'm not just going to do that. And their response is, no, we have to do the internal conflict. And his response was, I know I'm dead last in this game. I'm not giving up my 2 pineapples because they're worth final victory points. I'm already not going to win. You have to sweeten this deal, or we all lose. And so the 2 people in the lead called his bluff. We're like, okay, we're not giving up our pineapples. And it gets back to his turn. Okay, game's over. Who was wrong in that situation?
Wow. It is absolutely, in my opinion, the guy who didn't give up the pineapples won that situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, like, in my opinion, me getting last in a game is absolutely worse than getting is absolutely worse than the whole group losing. I mean, if the whole group loses, I would rather the whole group lose than me get even second place, but not necessarily all case. I would say if it's a 4-player or less game, and obviously there's a lot of other factors go into it, I would say that in a 4-player or less game, generally speaking, a regular type game, what does regular mean? Anyway, I would rather see all players lose than even take second, third, or fourth, because I would rather, not be beaten. In the case that this 3-player game that you're saying, like, nobody was beaten in this game, because everybody was beaten. Every player ended that game on an equal playing ground, on a level playing field. Like first and second, nope, that no longer exists. We're all losers together.
That was kind of the weird consensus in arguments, was essentially all three people were playing hardball, because it turns out also had more pineapples they could have given in. Or the argument was basically like, was the behest on the first and second player to give in to the third player's demand? He had the pineapple, and basically everyone was playing hardball, but who really situation? I honestly didn't have an answer for that. It was a fascinating study on, and some people, like, there was arguments. This was a long thread that was going on at the time, but a lot of people were like, no, the third player should have kept the game going, and the others like, no, dude, they were playing hardball with him and just trying to kick him further in the last place. He was perfectly, okay and just burning the island down, basically. I honestly don't know who's in the right. I think that's the weirdness of those semi-cooperative games. You can end up in these situations where it can come down to one person, and the one person goes, you know what, I'm not winning. I don't really care if any of you win either.
Like, to me, that's the way the game should go. That would be the way that I would play in that game. And I would say, because of that attitude that I take, I generally don't look or seek out those types of games, and I've actually not yet found one that I'm that big of a fan of. I would say maybe the closest that I'm a fan of would be Churchill. Churchill's a great example of what I would call semi-cooperative. Like, you can lose the war.
Churchill's not semi-cooperative.
You can lose the war in Europe, though, Trent. You can lose the war, and everybody can lose. But I guess in the situation everybody loses, don't you? You still count up points. It's just different.
Yes. I don't view it as semi-cooperative. I think you cooperate if it benefits you, but that's like true in like diplomacy. You cooperate if it benefits you.
But in the situation that Germany wins in the battle for Europe, that changes the way the points are scored, correct? Or do you even count up points in that situation? It's been a little while.
Well, there's a little bit different scoring if Germany wins the war. It does unfold a little bit different. I think in some tournament formats, it's not considered really a win. But I mean, obviously, when you sit down at the end of a game like that, you're going to count up the score and see who has the most points. And
you still do? Okay, because when I had played, I think there was some mention of the fact that it was different, but basically the person teaching the game was like, yeah, you don't want that to happen. Like, when that happens, that's kind of like losing the game.
You can feel like, the way I look at it is, if Germany still wins, you just lost a little less than the others.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's still, in the end, that feels like a win, I guess, to me. So,
well, I mean, I guess you could always like be almost like that sleeper agent where you're like secretly working for Germany, because you know that if they win, then you're in position to actually get the victory, which makes it still that kind of semi-co-op. But at least in that case, there's a real winner and not just everybody loses. But I understand what you're saying. There's cooperation in many competitive games, but without making them necessarily even partially cooperative.
Yes, that I would agree with.
And then I had a second situation I was thinking of here. Let's take the game Dead of Winter, right? Another semi-cooperative.
I'm going to point out that I have a general soft spot for Dead of Winter because of how it does theme. I think I have mechanical issues with it, but thematically, I think it does what it's trying to do really well.
Oh, yeah. I'm not dissing on a game. I just want to bring it up as a situation. Okay. So let's take the game Dead of Winter, right? So in Dead of Winter, you have a group goal where everyone has to work together to do this, or you lose the game state, right? But each of you has an individual goal that if you don't make it, even if everybody wins, you still kind of lose. So, and I've never run into this situation, but I've read about the Mystical Alliance that does this. Let's say there's a situation in Dead of Winter where, because you have to give so many items each round for certain things. Let's say you're near the end of the game. If you give up 2 fuel that you have hoarded, you win for everybody, but you will lose your individual goal. And then the argument basically is, well, what should you do? Give up the fuel so that everyone can win but you? Or do you be selfish and say, well, I can't win, therefore nobody can win? And people have very definite feelings about that. I don't honestly know which way I would go in that situation. But I mean, there's people that will, like, if you say, nah, I'm not winning, I'll take everyone down with me, like, go ballistic on you.
I feel like, though, like, here's the thing, Andy. If you're in a situation where where your end goal, let's just say that your end goal is incredibly difficult, like, and it's just not happening, right? Like, you're doing all that you can, and there's a heavy dose of randomness in Dead of Winter, and it very largely involves, like, kind of almost a Firefly-like element where you're just going to a specific area and fishing for a certain card. In a lot of cases, you know, like, you need to have 4 medicine or 4 food or something. And let's just say, though, that the medicine just isn't coming up, right? That, like, you go there and your person gets, you know, maybe you roll a tooth, they get bit, something like that. But, you know, things are just not happening for you. Does that mean now you're going to start working against the group? Because I think in Dead of Winter, it really sets the tone, though, more for, like, players to feel like they still accomplished something even if they didn't win. Because there's not really a first place in Dead of Winter. I think that's one of the big distinctions to make, is that, like, if you win Dead of Winter, you win Dead of Winter, right? Like, if you were on the winning team but you didn't win, then you technically didn't win, but it doesn't feel like you lost. It just kind of feels like, well, my weird fetish didn't get fulfilled. You know, like, oh, I really wanted to build barricades, but I just didn't get a chance to. Ah, darn. Well, maybe next time.
But I mean, within the rules that are allowed within the game, you can take it, like, if you so desire. The big argument then, the counter argument to that people will make is, well, but then you're not playing thematically to the game. Another one I have on this, I guess, for example, is I can't remember the Camelot game. I can't remember that now. The one,
Shadows
over Camelot.
I didn't know for sure what you were trying to think of. So,
well, yeah, okay. So in Shadows over Camelot, what I have found is, and I haven't played this insanely amount of times, but if you're playing at a lower player count, like we played at 3-player in the family several times, it quickly became apparent to me that, well, first of all, in the 3-player game, it's a trader mechanic game, but you don't know whether you're a trader or a helper till, like, halfway through the game when you get half the swords on the table. And I think the reason is this: in a 3-player game, I've quickly come to the conclusion that if you want to win as the trader, once you know you're the trader, you should do your damnedest to get revealed as fast as possible, because that gives you your best chance to tank the game. So it kind of almost, like, forces you to break the spirit of the game. And that's, I guess, what I'm getting with this Dead of Winter thing is are you being bad if you're not playing to the spirit of the game, but you're playing the game by the mechanics you're allowed to, I guess?
What do you think, Trent?
I think things get disrupted in co-op and semi-co-op games. I really think a lot of these rules do get disrupted. I mostly brought it up in the context of a competitive game. Co-op and semi-co-op games bring up, especially semi-co-op, really mess with those kinds of, quote, rules. And I mean, this is just another example of that, because games with traders are semi-co-ops. That's what they are.
What about a cooperative game where you have players that, like, are just so dead set on one aspect of the game that they don't listen or don't care about another aspect of the game? And I mean, like, I'm thinking about this in the most innocent way possible. Like, I showed my parents how to play Freedom, the Underground Railroad, game I really love, but they would not, like, they just basically learned the mechanics of moving slaves to Canada and did that the whole game. Like, they did not at all actually focused on getting the slaves collected in an area so then you could, like, play a card to get some economy going to then make sure that the economic goal of the game is also being handled. And it made it for, you know, it was, like, impossible. It was like I realized about a third of the way through the game, like, this is just not going to happen. Like, we're not going to actually get to the late phase of the game because we're not going to be able to activate that they're doing nothing here but slaves. They're not. I don't even think they understand those aspects of the game that they're ignoring. I think they're just like, okay, this is a game where I take a little cube that represents a slave, and I do the best I can in moving as far as I can to get it to go to Canada, and that's it. To them, that was as simple as the game was. They almost need to play like on my first Freedom of the Underground Railroad. So in that case, am I upset that my other players are not playing for the win? They're just playing, one little aspect and ignoring other parts of the game. Or maybe it's my fault for playing a heavy game with my parents, and I kind of don't do that anymore.
I think that maybe a heavy game wasn't right for your parents. It's kind of a feeling I get from that.
Yeah, I definitely don't do heavy games with them anymore. So I mean, like it's, it was entertaining though. They really liked it. They liked the feeling of being able to be abolitionists, but they weren't prepared for the economic goal that the game throws on you to kind of contrast and actually give it gameplay, which is what I like about it. They just liked the feeling of getting, to read events from the time period and do the best they could, to do the right thing, which to them, like the human story of saving an individual was much more important than the kind of like more nebulous, like, oh, we need to raise this money, and to do that, we kind of have to manipulate the slaves. That feels a little bit bizarre. But I mean, like, that's kind of what you had to do. Otherwise, how are you going to get money as an abolitionist? I mean, I don't know.
I don't know either.
When it, like suboptimal play, when it comes down to suboptimal play, I think one of the biggest things is like if you want to call somebody out for making a move, I think that's okay. But I think the context is really important. Like if you call out somebody for making a move in their first game of especially a complex game where there's a lot of things going on, like I just don't see why that type of environment is appropriate for that. I think that maybe, like you maybe mention it and move forward, but like, to me, there's a lot of deniability, especially in the first play of a game. Like if I'm playing a game of Agricola with other people that really know the game, and I have somebody who's feeling like taking action specifically to block me and not for their own benefit, I might ask them about that. Is that appropriate, Trent? If I'm like, dude, you don't need that at all. Like you just took the building rooms action to build a single stable, and I feel like you did that just to block me from building a room. What do you think about that, Trent?
I don't have any problem asking someone like, what's up with that? But if they can explain it, then I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense, and I don't care anymore. Like if their answer is like, because I want to screw you, dude, then I'll be like, I don't like you. But if they're like, I'm doing this because you blocked me out earlier, and I don't feel like I have a route to win, so I'm paying you back. I'm okay with that. I really am. Mm-hmm. But and what I'm saying, I think this is my best route to get third place, which is the best spot I think I can finish. Again, fine with it. It's when you start pulling in elements from outside the game and things like that that I start getting on like, I don't like that. That's where I start.
Next game of Agricola we play together, Trent, I'm going to not have enough stuff to build a room. I'm not going to have enough stuff to build a room. Just have enough wood to build like a stable or two. And I'm going to take that build room spot in the round that you're planning on building to prepare for a family growth.
Okay.
He should have got first player, shouldn't he?
Oh, ouch. No, I'm just kidding. Like, but you know what I mean? Like,
I get your point though. If you're playing,
that's like a move that's bizarre. Like nobody would ever do that. Like if you know the game of Agricola, it is absolutely bizarre to take that action. And I've never thought about that, though. In the game of Agricola, I'm never thinking, when I go take this action, I'm just blocking a person, right? Like, but that's a lot of times in Agricola, it's almost like I'm making the action tree in my head of what everybody's going to do. Mm-hmm. But anyway, I'm just trying to come up with a specific scenario.
Let's put it this way, I guess. Another one that's come up about this in our game group occasionally is Terra Mystica, back when we used to play that. So, there were people that will sometimes take moves that don't really net them many points, but just, hey, I'm blocking you out of an area. It doesn't net me really any points, but I'm denying you points. I mean, that's happened in that game before for us a time or two. Like I'm playing suboptimally on the map just to jack you. I don't know if I'm okay with that. Like I said, it really depends on the game. If someone's going to shaft me in a war game or a game like an
A
Infamous
conflict
Traffic.
game.
Yeah, that doesn't bother me. It's just like that's what I
Part of the
signed on
game.
for.
Yeah.
But if it's in, yeah, like a game of optimization, and then you're just like, I'm doing this insanely suboptimal action for me just to like, because
Make
I have the
your move
opportunity.
less optimal.
Right. And here's the thing that can really be annoying in that I'm taking this move purely for the act of I can. I saw an opportunity to screw you, and that seems entertaining to me to do so. So, like, where that would be appropriate to me or not in a game of Terra Mystica, if, you know, I'm playing you, Joe, and you're in the lead, taking a move that denies you points inherently brings me closer to you. However, if you're in third place and I'm in fourth place, and then I decide to screw you over, or maybe you're in second and I do that, I don't know. That's kind of a different thing to me. If I'm like kicking somebody else, just because I can, like it doesn't really improve me that much. That's where I'm just like, really, is this the kind of game you should be playing?
Yeah, maybe it comes down to play styles. Well, thank you guys very much. That was a really awesome discussion, and I think, you know, any more discussion, maybe come to our forums, go to our Board Game Geek Guild, which is on Board Game Geek Guild number 2173. If you just go to BoardGameGeek/Guild/2173, you'll be able to join the Good, the Board, and the Ugly Guild and participate further in any written comments and stuff. Everybody here in the podcast follows that pretty closely, and I definitely do enough to be able to at least let anybody else who's letting life get in the way, you know, make sure, like, Smackdown, guys, you had a comment. No, I'm not actually going to do that, but I might mention it to them. So thank you, though, very much, Trent, for suggesting this topic, because I've really enjoyed talking about it, and I like how it's very contextual for you. I think this is a good way to sort of unpack an experience, you know, and try to be able to make sure that you're doing the right thing to put it forth in front of in front of some guys that aren't really going to be necessarily involved parties. And anyway, yeah, let's get on to hype in games. But before we do that, I've mentioned this in previous podcasts. This podcast is not asking anything from our viewers and listeners. We're not asking anything specifically from you guys to help support this podcast. It takes some time, takes some effort on the parts of all of us. And there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes with a lot of the content that we're creating and whatnot. But I'm not going to ask you guys for anything specifically to donate to this podcast. However, on behalf of the Good, the Board, and the Ugly, and the fact that we are not doing this for money. We are doing this because we love it. We are doing this because we love the hobby. And because of that, though, I would like to ask you guys to donate to the Red Cross relief efforts, specifically for the recent tragedies in the United States. And there was a huge earthquake that hit very close to Mexico City, and there's been hundreds of deaths. You know, I've shared a link here on our YouTube video that goes to a New York Times article about where's the best place to give money. If you have podcasts that you support, if you find this content worth your money, any amount, please just go and find a way to give it there. You know, consider that your support of us making the world a better place. So thank you very much for understanding, listening to that. Let's now get on to hyping games, and let's kick it off with Andy's game, which I believe is the expansion to Splendor, Cities of Splendor. Andy, take it from here.
Yeah. So I'm going to hype a game that's exactly like Splendor, called Dynasty, the Era of the Five Dynasties. Yes. So if you love Splendor, you should come play this game with me. Anyway, no, this is I think it's their most, no, it was released right before Table Battles, but Dynasty, the Era of the Five Dynasties, is another Hollenspiel game. This one is it kind of reminds me a bit of Time of Crisis that was originally out by GMT Games. So you're playing in this very tumultuous time in China. So you play with 3 to 4 people. One player plays the emperor. The rest of the players are playing regional governors. And it's a little asymmetric. So the things you're going to be doing as an emperor are different from the actions that you're going to be doing as a governor. You do different things to gain victory points. You know, when you reach a certain threshold, you win the game, so on and so on. The thing that makes this kind of interesting to me is this asymmetrical balance aspect. So as the emperor, I can affect the governor's games by doing X, Y, and Z. The governors can affect my game by doing X, Y, and Z. I get choices how I pass out certain cards, which can have random events or other things on it. And it just seems like this really interesting balance. But it does remind me of Time of Crisis, because kind of the way my imagining is how this is going to work out is somebody's going to start as emperor, but they are not going to be able to maintain being emperor forever. At some point, one of the governors is going to become emperor, and then the old emperor becomes a governor, and it's just this, you keep trying to topple the guy in charge, gaining points as you do so. But the way that you can kind of affect each other's game states is very interesting. It does have some dice combat, but it's a little bit mitigatable because you have so many points for how many armies you bring in. You roll a d6 and add those to the point value. So if you want a little bit better of a chance, just bring more armies. That'll help offset the randomness. It's just got that interesting thing. There are a lot of like random event cards in the sense, and they're pretty much all horrible, because if you've ever played any of the Romance of Three Kingdoms like computer games, it just seems like every other day you're getting a plague of locusts or flood or something. But the interesting thing is, the Emperor draws basically a benefit card and an event card, and the event card is usually horrible. They choose those cards, so I get to choose, if I'm Emperor, which governor is going to get the benefit and which governor has this thing to deal with. And often this thing to deal with has some choices. So it might say put out bandit counters, but that governor gets to decide where they go. So they're going to probably like shaft other governors trying to beat them down. So it gives the emperor a way of directing the flow of the game among the governors. Governors are looking for weakness on you to try to basically take over the job of being emperor. And that sounds very interesting to me. I like those sort of interlocking mechanisms with some high interaction. Just a note, this game, I believe, is designed by, I think it's Richard H. Berg, who also designed Campaign for North Africa. But don't worry, this game's a modest 2 to 3 hours as compared to 1,500 hours.
Where you have a log that you keep of every single soldier and every battalion and all of their like mental states.
Yep. So not quite that crazy, but this one does look really interesting. And I guess the only thing I have to say based on some things I've seen from Hollandspiel is they're putting out really interesting games. This looks like another one. And please, Eurogamers, if this sounds interesting, quit complaining to Tom Russell about Paper Maps. It's a war game company and a boutique publisher. Just deal with having a paper map or learn some print and play skills like I did and mount your own map. But you're going to get that, because otherwise a $50 game for him would cost $70, $80. And that's just the nature of this print on demand that he does. But they're unique, quirky games, and this is another one I really want to try. So that's Dynasty.
Yeah, Andy, I think that, that pedigree of the designer there with the Campaign for North Africa is just maybe making me a little hesitant here on this one. I would love to hear all about how great it is and how much you think I'd love it after you've played it. But yeah, for the hype right now, I'm not going to jump on your train.
I'll say this much. The reaction to Time of Crisis, I don't know if you'd like it, but I think you might like this one a little more, because it doesn't seem like there's as much randomness, maybe. I don't know.
I don't think there's as much randomness. Man, what a selling point.
Well. It looks interesting. I want to try it, so we'll get to it someday.
Oh, sure.
I'll get Jake to play it. It'll be fine. No, I won't do that.
That one's good. All right, Trent, you want to jump on this with telling us about the new one in the series, Trans-America, Trans-Europe, and Transatlantic?
No, that's not it at all. No. If I would not be hyping it if it was the next in that series, trust me. Actually, the reason I'm hyping Transatlantic is I don't know a whole ton about it, but I do know that it's a new release by one of my favorite designers, and that'd be Mac Gertz, who's done Concordia, which I love, Navigador, which I love,
Right behind you there.
Imperial,
Yep.
yeah, Imperial 2030, which I love, Imperial, which I love. Just like tons of games, and I've enjoyed everything he's done. And he has a new game coming out at Essen that sounds like it's a little bit of a departure for his design. It sounds like it might be like a little bit of like pseudo deck building to it. I'm not really sure what's going on with it. Maybe more along the lines of Concordia. It's called Transatlantic, and it's supposed to simulate the growth of the transatlantic shipping from about 1860 to about 1920 or so, something like that, as clipper ships gave way to like steamships to go across the ocean. Like, think of like old style clipper ships, and then they turn into ships like the Titanic. That's kind of the period that he's covering, is how those ships transition. So you're playing someone who's trying to like run a shipping company to manage that transition, get as much value out of your clipper ships as you can until they're completely subsumed by the steamer ships and move over to them. And this seems to be done with some sort of gameplay or card mechanism. I've seen the cards, and they have a fair amount of information on them. And I understand that on the turn, it's a matter of playing a card and doing the action on the card. But I haven't quite seen how it all fits together. I'm intrigued to see how it all fits together, and I trust the designer implicitly because I've liked everything I've played by him. This comes out on November 8th from Rio Grande Games in America. So you should be able to get it at your local game shop in about a month and a half, and I'm pretty sure I'll be getting this one as soon as possible. It's Transatlantic.
Good stuff, man. I'm going to be all over this one, too, when it comes out.
I'm actually a little intrigued in this one because I saw a picture of like one of the ship cards, and it almost sort of gave like an 18XX vibe sort of thing to it.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I'll give it a shot.
Well, that sounds really interesting, Trent. I'm very much behind you there with being excited for this one coming out in the near future. So you said in November?
November 8th. It's supposed to be out in the U.S. from Rio Grande. It's like
all right.
Release, but they apparently are just all ready to get it in the U.S. too. So it's all good.
Oh, I appreciate that as well. All right. My hype to end this one out is Aeon's End War Eternal, which I'm very excited to give a chance here. It is the standalone expansion to Aeon's End, and the artwork, which was about the only thing people really had to criticize in Aeon's End, is much improved. Graphic design is kind of the more improvement because the artwork was decent. Just the graphic design was a little bit like, it felt a little bit old school. Like it looked older than it needed to. And then some of the components, like the punch boards, like had rough, like just straight cut square edges, which is fine and acceptable if you're like Andy, square cut edges are everything. But in a game that, where it just felt a little bit cheapy, especially when, artwork is pretty important in a game that has such a really strong theme. Deck builder, you're going to have to shuffle your cards, and it's cooperative, and there's all sorts of different nemesis to face, and all different mages to be, and it's got a Dominion style line, so it's none of this Ascension legendary stuff. It's really, really next level of strategy, something I'm really excited for. Aeon's End War Eternal. Trent, have you played Aeon's End?
I have played Aeon's End. I quite like it. It's a very fun deck building game. It does some interesting stuff. I'm a fan of it. I find it's a good co-op where you feel like you're making independent decisions. Whereas I like co-ops that avoid the alpha gaming problem, and I feel like Aeon's End does that in a number of ways. The fact that you all have your own individual decks, you all have to make your own individual decisions. I'm a fan. It's a good one.
Okay. I'm right behind you there. Well, that sounds pretty awesome, man. So, any final thoughts, gentlemen?
Play games and don't whine about them.
Yeah. Learn how to lose.
Yeah, and make sure, just win games and make sure that the other people have to figure out how to lose graciously.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Make people force buy diesels. Words to live by.
Well, thanks so much to everybody who's joined us here in our comments. It's been great to follow those and to make those a part of what we've been talking about and just to participate in that way. Thank you so much to everybody out there listening who's donated to any of those causes that I've mentioned here. Just wanted to add really quickly the tragedy in Puerto Rico from Hurricane Maria as well. A lot of people don't understand that one only hit Puerto Rico, but it really destroyed the island. I mean, this is part of the United States here we're talking about. So, I mean, it's our fellow United States citizens. So it is a really crazy time in the world here with a lot of disasters striking this hemisphere and really striking close to home. So hopefully we can all do our part and make the world a better place. That's been this episode of The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly. I'm your host, Joe Sallin. I've been joined tonight by
Andrew Dennison.
Trent Ham.
Have a great week of gaming and catch us next week here on The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly.